Hi, welcome to March of my year of extreme productivity experiments. So this is a whole bunch of extreme experiments that I did back in 2013, and then just looking back on what I did, and then also looking over the last year or so in terms of what I've actually started to take from those experiments and how I'm influenced by those experiments to this very day. So this was 60 minutes. The idea was to change just the whole sort of notion of 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and to work in a very different way. So the idea was I would work 60 minutes a day, but I would do that 7 days a week. So it really changes this idea of you have 5 days on, 2 days off, and into much more of a thing of, work sits alongside the rest of your life, but also, obviously you're creating a lot more time for the rest of your life by only working an hour a day. So the idea was to set up this hour and to come up with which hour in the day it should be. Because it's like, should it be 9 till 10? Should it be midday? Should it be midnight? You can pick any hour, right? If you're only working for an hour a day. So I asked the dice. The February experiment was Dice Man, so I was making decisions by the throw of a dice. So I sat there going, when's my hour going to be? So I came up with 2:30 to 3:30 in the afternoon. Probably the worst decision the dice made in the entire month of February. Because it's like, it's just like so frustrating. It's in the middle of the day. It's just after lunch. It means that, if you're going to go out, it's either after 3:30 or you've got to go out really early in the morning to get back for lunch and all that sort of thing. So it wasn't the best decision, and it would be 7 days a week. So there was a couple of instances where I had clashes. I had already got tickets to go and see Bobby McFerrin in concert in London. So that was an afternoon thing. Couldn't work 2:30 to 3:30 that day. A couple of other instances like that. And then the breakdown was very simple. So for me, it was like anything that's to do with the operations of Think Productive, my company, that would be stuff that would be classed as work. Anything that was to do with, personal work, like, washing up or chores at home or anything like that, that would all just be classed as non-work. And there was no emphasis on the stuff that I enjoyed versus not enjoyed. So Tim Ferriss in 4 Hour Workweek has this whole thing of like, work is only stuff that you don't enjoy. I think work is just work. Like, it's the stuff that either pays your bills or it's the stuff where you're creating stuff. So I think it's whether you enjoy it or not, actually. So I kind of set it up in that way. So anything that was to do with my business, Think Productive in the UK, that was work. Anything that was not to do with that, whether it was marathon training, which I was doing at the time, or whether it was just chores at home, that would be separate. And I really had no expectations in terms of what it would mean for the rest of the month. I kind of had this vague idea of, so if you're a UK person of a similar age to me, I don't have a TV and I don't watch ITV very much at all, so I don't know whether this still exists, but remember like the body form adverts where like the women would jump out of the plane and be on roller skates and be, just living this like fantastic life. And I'd just been up to like a hill a couple of weeks before where there was paragliding going on, and I was thinking, when I have all this time, I'll learn to paraglide and do all this kind of amazing stuff. Got into the month, and what happened was quite different. So I had this sort of notion of like, okay, so instead of doing work, I'm going to do fun. I'm just going to do fun in this big way. And it didn't really happen. What I found was, maybe because I was a little bit tired and maybe because I had lots of other stuff going on at the time, and I was training for this marathon and stuff, most of the time ended up, that was no longer taken up with work, ended up with me just being. So for the first time in a long time, this wasn't about doing, it was just about being. It was just about being present, sitting at home, really not doing very much and giving myself the permission to not do very much. And that's not so glamorous, it's not so exciting, it doesn't conjure up these amazing kind of body form jumping out of plane kind of images. But it's a really important thing that I think we have lost in our kind of pursuit of productivity, careers, success, happiness, all these kind of slightly what's the phrase, like a MacGuffin kind of things, the magic MacGuffin in films where you never quite find out the Holy Grail, you never quite get there. And I think often what we miss, what we lack, is just the notion of just being and giving ourselves the permission to do that. So that was probably like the biggest revelation for me from what happened outside of the work. You're probably also wondering what happened during the hour, right? So the whole point of these extreme productivity experiments is that they are extreme. I don't propose anybody tries to work for an hour a day. I don't think it's sustainable. It wasn't sustainable for me. It was surprising how much I was able to keep on top of during that month. So it made me a lot more ruthless in terms of when you've only got an hour and you can feel that clock ticking, and then you've got, you can't come back to it until tomorrow. It really makes you ruthless in terms of, being able to just, make decisions very, very quickly, move things forward really quickly. And what was quite surprising was in terms of just maintenance, in terms of just getting back to people with decisions, in terms of removing myself as the bottleneck from lots of elements of the work. An hour a day is actually fine. Like, you can actually function in that kind of sense. What was lacking from the whole month was creation. So in that whole month, I really couldn't make the time and space in only an hour a day to write more blog posts or do any more thinking or writing or moving things forward or starting new stuff or whatever. So all of that creation kind of part of the work really went out the window. And I suspect if, for a lot of businesses where you have, some element of your time as the person running the business is about business development, pushing it forward, delivering on the strategy, growing it, that kind of thing, that would be the thing that suffered if you're only working an hour a day. So that was, it wasn't that surprising that some things suffered, but it was also quite interesting that an hour a day was actually a very useful constraint in terms of, being able to just not feel like I was a bottleneck during that time and actually feel like things are still moving even on just an hour a day. So I suppose the conclusion from me from that was an hour a day doesn't feel like enough, but suddenly 7 or 8 hours in a day, a full work day, a 9 to 5 kind of typical work day, feels like such an absolute luxury in terms of how much time we have. And it makes you start to think about how some of that time is wasted and some of your attention is wasted on certain things. So I really started to think about that in terms of, okay, what about if I did 3 or 4 hours? What if there was a way that I could, replicate this idea of constraint, but not be as extreme as 1 hour? I have to say, probably the one that so I've changed certainly my schedule, and I explained in the last video that I have this thing where the morning is about creating at home and the afternoon is about connecting, which I do in the office. So collaborating and connecting is kind of the afternoon thing. So I've kind of got this structure that is influenced really by a couple of these months and has certainly helped. But I've never gone back to doing an hour a day, for instance. And even though the idea of doing 3 or 4 hours and that being a kind of set routine, I think is a really good one, it's never something I've really sort of put into practice since. I'd quite like to. And also just the idea of having this sort of notional, the boundary is a time in the day rather than days of the week, so I'd love to think about that some more. I'm noticing a lot more in 2015 how particularly a lot of the freelancers that I'm working with and people who are developing, say, websites and tech stuff for us and that kind of thing, don't tend to discriminate between Fridays and Saturdays so much anymore. Whereas I've always been pretty good at that. My thing is by Friday, I realise the importance of ninja preparedness and rest and recuperation. So I'll often just, by Friday evening I shut down and I really don't think about work very much until Monday morning. So I'm very kind of boundaried around that stuff generally. But I'd love to think that through in a different way. So just the idea of working all through the weekend, but that work only be an hour a day or a couple of hours a day, and just, thinking about all the other days as days where you can treat them a bit like weekends as well. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of exciting. And I think there's some more experimentation to be done by me at some future point. So that's probably my main reflections from the experiment 60 minutes. And I think there's been some useful stuff that has sort of influenced and sort of bled into the general way that I work now. I wouldn't say I've gone back to it as fully as I could have done. I think there's definitely some more to do, but I hope that's been of interest to you guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts on your best times, your work boundaries, how you can play around with the hours that you work, create that constraint for yourselves and see what that means in terms of your own decision making, your own productivity.